Hi team, welcome back to our Introduction to Ancient Greece Anchor Fact series of printables and mini lessons. This video will serve as a summary and conclusion to this series, focusing on the Roman conquest of Greece and the story of the survival of Greco-Roman civilization to this day. We started this series talking about the fact that ancient Greece disappeared, but there are many signs that we are still living in a modern version of Greco-Roman culture. We live in a scientific culture, thanks to Greece. We study history, thanks to Greece. We study philosophy and use logic to help us in both science and history, thanks to Greece. We vote, because the Greeks taught us to. We use Greek styles in our buildings. We use an alphabet and words that come from Greece. We also enjoy the festival of the Olympic Games in a special dedication to our Greek heritage, ever since circa 776 BC. The Olympics, as we saw, were first celebrated at Olympia to build a greater bond between the Greek city-states. The separate city-states each have their own histories because they could never come together as one country. But among them, Athens is by far the most important, so we focused our studies there. We saw that Solon became a famous lawgiver by abolishing the enslavement of Athenian citizens by one another, by forcing the Athenians to abandon debt slavery, circa 594 BC. We saw that this did not prevent them from suffering periodic famines and civil wars, because the commoners could not participate in government, until Cleisthenes proposed that all citizens should participate in the making of the laws, circa 508 BC. Democracy was born. But it almost didn't survive, because the Persian Empire came calling. Luckily, the Greeks worked together to defeat this common enemy in the Greco-Persian Wars of circa 500 to 449 BC. We know much of this story because the Greek historian, the first in the world, Herodotus, wrote his Inquiries to tell us why it happened. Sadly, when the common enemy was defeated, the Greeks turned on each other, with Athens and Sparta fighting to become the leaders of Greece. We know the story of this Peloponnesian War because the second great historian in history, Thucydides, wrote about it. The infighting of the Greeks left them vulnerable to being conquered by their neighbors, the Macedonians, under the father of Alexander the Great, Philip of Macedon. When his father died, Alexander took the Greeks on an odyssey of conquest from Egypt to India, forging the largest empire in the history of the world up to that point. But this empire was more than Greece could maintain. When this spread out version of Greece collided with Rome, it was conquered by the Romans. How did that happen? The two sides collided because some Greeks and Macedonians had been fighting against the expansion of Rome and decided to help another people known as the Carthaginians in a war against the Romans. We will learn about this in greater detail in our upcoming Anchor Fact series of mini lessons and printables on ancient Rome. Weakened by their wars against each other and spread too thin by their conquests of Alexander, the Greeks could not resist the Romans in the end. And in 146 BC, they were conquered once and for all. There's only one piece of good news about this. The Romans admired the Greeks, even though they defeated them. They admired Greek sculpture and went on to produce art in the same style. They admired Greek literature and went on to produce stories like those of the Greeks, such as the Aeneid of Virgil, which resembles the Odyssey of Homer. They learned to study history from the Greeks and produced many important historians themselves. A Greek historian named Polybius, living in the Roman Empire, wrote the history of the Roman conquest of Greece. A Roman historian named Livy wrote the history of the rise of Rome. The Romans weren't great scientists, but they were great engineers, and they built even more amazing structures, sometimes in a Greek style, that survive to this day. And thanks to the Romans, who built a vast empire from Britain to Egypt and Mesopotamia, Greek ideas spread far and wide. So far and wide that even when the Roman Empire fell, the story of Greece could not be erased. We remember it well to this day. Americans and others have a tradition of Thanksgiving. When we celebrate it, we should also spend a moment to thank the Greeks for everything they gave us. I hope you've enjoyed this Anchor Fact series of mini lessons and printables on ancient Greece. And I look forward to talking with you again in our next series on ancient Rome, and after that, China. See you soon.